start with candidate 1 first for your 1 minute open, followed by Mr. Thompson.
Thank you for this great opportunity. I was born and raised in China and American by choice, an immigrant to this country 23 years ago. And I'm a family man, a husband, and 2 lovely children. And I'm a PTA dad with 2 public school kids. And I'm a small business owner, and I also dedicated in community services, has been with North Atlanta Rotary Club for 13 years with 100% perfect attendance. I guess my time is out. And basically, I'm running office is want to set an example for new American citizens like me to recognize this is a great country. When we take the oath to become American citizen, we're not a second-class citizen, and we have the responsibility to this country, to our future. So that's why I get involved, and I thank you for getting involved here as well.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
I want to thank you, and I want to thank everyone who's come here. I'm Kurt Thompson, and it's been my pleasure to be the person the folks in the 5th District hired to represent them these last 6 years as their state senator. And I have also served prior 2 years as a state representative in the multi-member district, covering much of what is now the 5th District community as well. So I've been 8 years down in the General Assembly. I'm a native of Gwinnett County, actually born in DeKalb County, but that's because that's where the hospital was, raised in the area. And have truly enjoyed giving back to my community where my late grandmother's home is, where I've lived basically my entire life. It's my hope to continue working on the issues for the people of the 5th District. If they choose, after interviewing me again at this and other forums, if they choose to rehire me to be our representative again for the next 2 years in the state Senate, it will be my pleasure to continue going there, working on issues like public transportation, the environment, education, making sure that we have the best communities that we can possibly have in our state.
Thank you. Now this round is going to be different because we have candidates from the Democrats and the Republicans. And what we're going to do is I'm going to start with you, Mr. Guam, for the first question, and then we'll rotate in order of who gets to answer the question first.
Okay.
Are you gentlemen okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay, Mr. Guam. The state's power plants, paper manufacturers, and other industries are large consumers of water across the state. What is your solution to our water wars, and how will you ensure that Georgia's citizens' agricultural production and industries have safe, clean, and a reliable water supply?
This question is a very interesting one. First thing is that these power plant or manufacturers are the ones that are part of our economy, and they create a job and support the state economically. And of course, we have our regulations about the water clean discharge, and we just need to enforce our existing laws and make sure these manufacturers and these plants that follow the rule of law and make sure keep the water they discharge is safe.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure, just to make sure I heard it correctly.
The state's power plants, paper manufacturers, and other industries are large consumers of water across the state. What is your solution to our water wars, and how will you ensure that Georgia's citizens' agricultural production and industries have safe, clean, and a reliable water supply?
Sure. I mean, the water war is actually sort of the sleeping giant of issues in this campaign. A lot of people don't think about it because they go to their faucet, they turn it on, water comes out. It's that simple. And even you're referencing a court case, which we've basically been told we can't use Lake Lanier for drinking water. It's just sort of that simple. We've got to come up with new solutions. One of those solutions is we've got to have a very active governor pursuing a negotiated settlement. We've got to encourage the federal government to intervene to change the act that restricted Lake Lanier Lake Lanier's use. But we also need to do things locally and at the state legislative issue. It's not an issue about environmental regulations per se and what these power plants and paper plants are doing. It's about how do we get more with what we've got. One of the biggest issues that we've got to address is conservation. Even though there's definitely an issue and possibly a need for more reservoirs in the state, the bottom line is a reservoir costs about as much as a nuclear power plant and is just about as efficient economically in terms of delivering water cheaply to citizens. Whereas if we had some state-mandated conservation techniques where when a house is sold or a new house is built, that they were required to put in basically the low-flow toilets, low-flow water faucets and other things, we would actually save more money by retrofitting our existing buildings. If the state government alone retrofitted its own buildings, just its buildings, because remember we have the state prison system and such, we would save enough water just by taking care of our own state business to eliminate the need for one of those proposed reservoirs. So I think the key there is some of this conservation, giving tax incentives to government, to local governments to retrofit their buildings, giving incentives to local governments to retrofit their buildings and giving incentives to businesses to retrofit their buildings, because so much of this is commercial consumption, actually. It's not population consumption.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start off with Mr. Thompson. In Georgia, women make up half of the labor force, with 2/3 of mothers with children under age of 6 working outside of the home. However, less than half the private sector workforce has any paid sick days. Proposed legislation for flexible sick days would not require any expansion of current benefits, but would simply allow employees to use their accrued sick days for the illness or routine medical appointment of a child, spouse, or parent, as well as for their own illness. Would you support state legislation in Georgia for flexible use of sick days?
Yes, I would. I mean, there needs to probably be some caveats about the size of the general business so that it's not simply a mandate across the board. But I think in general, similar to other acts, once you get over a certain number of employers, once you get over 5 employees, for instance, you're required to have workers' comp insurance. I think at some point you need to look at that and make sure that you do create that so that you have a level playing field so that people can care for their kids. So I think it's certainly something to look at. I know that Representative Bruce in the House has in the past had similar legislation about that, and I certainly think that we should take a look at that again.
Thank you. Mr. Guam, did you need me to repeat the question, or are you okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. In Georgia, women now make up half of the labor force, with 2/3 of mothers with children under age 6 working outside of their home. However, less than half the private sector workforce has any paid sick days. Proposed legislation for flexible sick days would not require any expansion of current benefits, but would simply allow employees to use their accrued sick days for the illness or routine medical appointment of a child, spouse, or parent, as well as for their own illness. Would you support state legislation in Georgia for flexible use of sick days?
Again, that will be depending on the size of business and number of employees. And I, in general, do not like the government mandate on private businesses. And our economy needs a strong workforce. And unless we can well-educate the business, it's a good business sense to take care of our employees. So let the business make their best decision. And for larger employers with a large number of employees that may impact it, and we can certainly consider certain legislation, and still more would be encouraging than a demand.
Thank you. Next, we'll start with Mr. Wan first. Okay. Previously, only U.S. law required businesses with federal contracts over $100,000 to use the Employment Eligibility Verification System to verify the work eligibility of applicants and employees. However, in 2007, Senate Bill 529 was passed requiring this verification from all public employers, including their contractors and subcontractors. Opponents say that E-verifying is costly in both time and fear of employers discriminating during the hiring process. Do you support mandating businesses in Georgia to verify their employees' eligibility, and/or how do you make sure this law is followed?